The story of the Kohinoor diamond begins deep within the heart of ancient India, where legends blur into history and myths intertwine with truth. The name Kohinoor, meaning mountain of light, would one day become synonymous with beauty, power, and controversy. But long before it adorned royal crowns, it lay hidden beneath the earth, waiting for human hands to unearth its destiny. Scholars believe that the diamond was discovered in the Golconda mines, located in the modern-day Indian state of Andhra Pradesh, a region once renowned for producing some of the world's finest gems. The exact date of discovery remains uncertain, but historians trace its origins as far back as 3000 BC to 1300 CE, suggesting that it may have been known to the ancient kingdoms of South India long before it entered recorded history. Early references to an enormous and dazzling diamond appear in various Indian texts and folklore, though none name it directly as the Kohinoor. It is said that the gem first belonged to the Kakatiya dynasty, rulers of the Deccan Plateau, who placed it in a temple as part of the idol of a Hindu goddess. To them, it was more than just a stone. It was a divine symbol of light, representing purity, strength, and eternal glory of the gods. The diamond, likely uncut and roughly 793 carats in its natural state, shone with a brilliance that captivated all who saw it. Even in those early centuries, the gem was believed to possess a mystical aura, capable of bringing great fortune to women, but terrible misfortune to men who wore it. This ancient curse, as it came to be known, would follow the Kohinoor through the ages, haunting every ruler who dared to claim it. As centuries passed, the tides of conquest swept across India. The Delhi Sultanate rose and fell, and the subcontinent became a tapestry of warring kingdoms. It was during this turbulent period that the diamond began its long journey through the hands of emperors, conquerors, and colonizers. One of the earliest historical mentions connects the gem to the Turco-Mongol invader Alauddin Khilji, who, after conquering the Deccan in the early 14th century, is said to have seized a gem from the Kakatiya treasury, although no concrete records verify this. One of the earliest historical mentions connects the gem to the Turco-Mongol invader Alauddin Khilji, who, after conquering the Deccan in the early 14th century, is said to have seized a gem from the Kakatiya treasury, although no concrete records verify this. When the Mughal Empire emerged in the 16th century, bringing with it an unprecedented era of wealth, architecture, and artistry, the Kohinoor became part of the Mughal treasury. It was most notably recorded in possession of Emperor Babur, the founder of the Mughal dynasty, who wrote about it in his memoir, the Baburnama. Babur mentions a diamond that had once belonged to the rulers of Malwa, gifted to him after his victory at the Battle of Panipat in 1526. This diamond, many historians argue, was the Kohinoor. From Babur's time onward, the gem became one of the crown jewels of the Mughal Empire, passed down through generations of emperors who saw it as both a divine blessing and a symbol of their imperial might. Under Emperor Shah Jahan, the builder of the Taj Mahal, the Kohinoor reached the height of its splendor. He had the gem mounted in his famous peacock throne, surrounded by other priceless stones like the Timur ruby and the great Mughal diamond. The throne itself was an astonishing creation, a masterpiece of gold, enamel, and precious stones, representing the grandeur of Mughal artistry. For Shah Jahan, the diamond embodied divine kingship. It was proof that his rule was ordained by God. Yet, the gem's supposed curse also loomed large. Shah Jahan's later life was marked by tragedy. His beloved wife Mumtaz Mahal died in childbirth, and he himself was imprisoned by his son Aurangzeb until his death. To many chroniclers, these misfortunes were the diamond's shadow at work. Even as it dazzled courts and captivated poets, the Kohinoor became more than a jewel. It became a symbol of imperial fate. Its possession was said to dictate the destiny of entire empires. Wherever it went, it brought rise and ruin. This belief added to its mystique. Emperors did not merely desire the Kohinoor for its brilliance, but for the divine power they believed it bestowed. Every ruler who possessed it saw it as a cosmic token of legitimacy, yet history would prove that none could truly hold it forever. Like the civilizations of India itself, the Kohinoor's story was one of glory followed by loss, triumph shadowed by downfall. By the late 17th century, the Mughal Empire had begun to wane. Aurangzeb's strict rule, endless wars, and religious intolerance weakened the empire's unity. The once glorious peacock throne was plundered, and the diamond that had symbolized Mughal eternity was now vulnerable to the ambitions of foreign powers. Beyond India's northern mountains, new conquerors were rising, men who had heard of the Mountain of Light and hungered for it. The Kohinoor's next journey would take it beyond Mughal palaces, into the hands of Persian shahs, Afghan kings, and eventually across the oceans to Britain. Thus began the second chapter of its saga, one that would transform the Kohinoor from an Indian treasure into a global symbol of conquest, colonialism, and controversy. Its brilliance would continue to shine, but the light it cast would reveal not just beauty, but the shadows of power, greed, and empire. As the Mughal Empire weakened in the late 17th and early 18th centuries, India became a magnet for invaders seeking its legendary riches. Among the treasures that drew foreign eyes, none was more coveted than the Kohinoor, the Mountain of Light. Its fame had already spread beyond India's borders through merchants, diplomats, and travelers who had seen its brilliance at the Mughal court. To the outside world, the Kohinoor represented the unimaginable wealth of Hindustan, a land fabled for its gold, silk, and diamonds. But as the Mughal dynasty descended into chaos, the diamond that once symbolized divine kingship became a prize of plunder for conquerors who saw in it both material fortune and imperial legitimacy. The defining moment in this transition came with the invasion of Nader Shah of Persia in 1739. A ruthless and brilliant general, Nader Shah was determined to restore Persian supremacy after years of decline. Hearing tales of India's wealth and the peacock throne encrusted with jewels, he marched his vast army across the Hindu Kush, defeating the Mughals at the fateful Battle of Kohinoor. The Mughal Emperor, Muhammad Shah Ranhila, surrendered with little resistance, allowing Nader Shah to march triumphantly into Delhi. For several days, the Persian army plundered the city, unleashing unimaginable destruction. Palaces were looted, temples desecrated, and thousands of civilians slaughtered. Amidst this devastation, Nader Shah seized the peacock throne and all its treasures, including the Kohinoor diamond. When Nader Shah first laid eyes upon the gem, legend says he was momentarily blinded by its brilliance. "Kohinoor," he exclaimed, Persian for Mountain of Light, and the name has endured ever since. The diamond, now part of Persia's royal treasury, became a symbol of his conquest and the humiliation of the once mighty Mughal Empire. Yet, true to its cursed reputation, the Kohinoor soon began to weave its spell of misfortune over Nader Shah himself. His reign, marked by paranoia and violence, descended into tyranny. Only a few years after seizing the diamond, he was assassinated by his own bodyguards in 1747, his empire collapsing in the aftermath. After Nader Shah's death, chaos engulfed Persia. The Kohinoor, along with other spoils, was carried off by Ahmad Shah Durrani, one of Nader's Afghan generals, who established the Durrani Empire in Afghanistan. With this, the gem entered a new chapter of its journey, from the Mughal palaces of India to the rugged mountains of Kabul and Kandahar. Under the Durranis, the Kohinoor became both a talisman of legitimacy and a symbol of divine kingship. Ahmad Shah wore it as a mark of divine favor, believing it would secure his dynasty's rule. However, the Afghan throne was no more immune to the diamond's curse than any empire before it. After Ahmad Shah's death, his successors fell into bloody rivalries and civil wars. The gem passed from one ruler to another, from Timur Shah to Shah Zaman, and then to Shah Shuja, each of whom experienced betrayal, imprisonment, or exile. The story of Shah Shuja Durrani and the Kohinoor is one of both tragedy and intrigue. Driven into exile by rival factions, Shuja sought refuge in India, carrying the Kohinoor as his last possession of power. He arrived at the court of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, the Lion of Punjab, who ruled the Sikh Empire from Lahore. Ranjit Singh, already a legendary figure known for his military genius and administrative acumen, recognized the diamond's political and symbolic power. He offered Shuja asylum, but at a price. In exchange for protection, Ranjit demanded the Kohinoor. Shuja initially refused, valuing the diamond as the last vestige of his royal dignity. But when his wife was taken hostage, he finally relented. Thus, in 1813, the Kohinoor entered the treasury of the Sikh Empire, beginning a new and fateful chapter in its odyssey. Under Maharaja Ranjit Singh, the diamond regained its place as a symbol of sovereignty and divine blessing. It was worn during state occasions and festivals, its unmatched sparkle reflecting the power of the Sikh Empire, which stretched from the Khyber Pass to the borders of Tibet. Ranjit Singh, though pragmatic and shrewd, was deeply aware of the gem's mystique. He reportedly had the Kohinoor tied to his arm during court ceremonies, believing it would bring him strength and protect his empire. Yet, even he could not escape the gem's shadow. Toward the end of his life, Ranjit Singh fell gravely ill, and as death approached in 1839, he expressed a wish to donate the Kohinoor to the Jagannath Temple in Puri as an offering to God. His ministers, however, fearing the loss of such a prized national treasure, ignored his dying wish, a decision that would later be seen as a fatal act of greed. After Ranjit Singh's death, the once unified Sikh empire descended into turmoil. Succession wars, internal betrayals, and British interference tore it apart. The Kohinoor, locked away in the Lahore Fort treasury, became a silent witness to the empire's disintegration. British diplomats and officers stationed in Punjab had already heard the diamond's legend and coveted it as a symbol of imperial triumph. As the East India Company extended its control across India, the Kohinoor was no longer just a jewel. It was a prize representing the subjugation of India itself. From the temples of the Kakatiyas to the Mughal palaces, from the blood-stained tents of Nader Shah to the marble courts of Lahore, the Kohinoor had traveled across empires and centuries. Each ruler who possessed it sought glory, yet met with tragedy. The diamond's radiance seemed to mirror the fleeting nature of power, dazzling yet doomed. As the 19th century dawned, a new empire was rising in the East, one whose ambitions would surpass even those of the Mughals and Persians. The British Empire now set its sights on the jewel that had already toppled kings and empires. The next chapter of the Kohinoor saga would see it carried across oceans, displayed in palaces far from its birthplace, and transformed into a symbol of colonial dominance. By the early 19th century, the Kohinoor diamond had found a new home in the treasury of the Sikh Empire, under the powerful and visionary ruler Maharaja Ranjit Singh. Known as the Sher Punjab, the Lion of Punjab, Ranjit Singh was not only a formidable military leader, but also a unifier who brought stability to a region long torn by wars and invasions. His empire, stretching from the Khyber Pass in the west to the Sutlej River in the east, was one of the last independent powers to stand between India and British colonial domination. The acquisition of the Kohinoor was more than a matter of wealth. It was a matter of divine legitimacy, in a world where symbols carried immense political and spiritual weight. Possessing the Kohinoor elevated Ranjit Singh's rule to that of emperors and conquerors before him. The transfer of the diamond from Shah Shuja Durrani to Ranjit Singh in 1813 marked a pivotal moment in its saga. Shah Shuja, once the ruler of Afghanistan, had fled to India after being dethroned by his brother. With him, he carried his last claim to power, the Kohinoor. Ranjit Singh, known for his diplomatic cunning, promised him protection and military aid in exchange for the diamond. When Shah Shuja hesitated, Ranjit Singh resorted to pressure and even imprisonment, forcing the Afghan king's hand. The transfer, recorded by multiple chroniclers of the time, was both political and symbolic. The Sikh Empire now possessed what the Mughals, Persians, and Afghans had once held, the jewel of empires. Under Ranjit Singh's reign, the Kohinoor occupied a central place in the royal treasury housed within the Lahore Fort, where it was kept in a richly adorned golden armlet or occasionally worn by the Maharaja during court ceremonies. Contemporary European travelers, like Baron Charles von Hugel and John Martin Honigberger, describe it as a dazzling gem of indescribable brilliance that seemed to embody the spirit of Punjab itself. Unlike his predecessors, Ranjit Singh viewed the Kohinoor not just as a possession of personal vanity, but as a sacred relic symbolizing his divine right to rule. He often had it displayed on state occasions, tied his right arm, or worn in his turban, as a talisman of strength and victory. However, as with all who possessed Kohinoor, fate turned dark. The Maharaja's later years were marred by ill health and palace intrigues. He suffered from paralysis, and his once mighty empire began to show cracks. As he neared death in 1839, Ranjit Singh made a profound wish that the Kohinoor be sent to the Jagannath Temple in Puri as an offering to the Hindu deity Lord Jagannath. Whether this was an act of repentance, devotion, or superstition remains unclear, but it reflected his awareness of the diamond's ominous curse. His courtiers, however, refused to part with the gem. They feared that surrendering such a symbol of royal power would weaken the empire. In hindsight, this act of disobedience would mark the beginning of Punjab's downfall. After Ranjit Singh's death, the Sikh empire descended into chaos. A violent struggle for succession erupted among his heirs, courtiers, and generals. Within a decade, 4 of his successors were either murdered or died mysteriously. The once strong Khalsa army became divided by internal factions, while British influence in the region grew steadily. The East India Company, which had already annexed much of India, began to eye Punjab, the last unconquered jewel of the subcontinent, and the Kohinoor became its ultimate symbol of conquest. By the 1840s, the Sikh Empire was ruled and named by Maharaja Dalip Singh, Ranjit Singh's youngest son, who was barely 5 years old when he ascended the throne. Real power lay in the hands of his mother, Maharani Jin Kaur, a fierce and politically astute queen who served as regent. She tried valiantly to preserve the independence of Punjab and safeguard her son's inheritance, including the Kohinoor. But the British, masters of manipulation, used every political opportunity to tighten their grip. Tensions escalated into open conflict with the First Anglo-Sikh War, 1845-46. Despite the valor of the Sikh soldiers, the British forces emerged victorious, forcing the Lahore Durbar into a humiliating treaty that stripped it of much of its territory and autonomy. The Second Anglo-Sikh War, 1848-49, sealed Punjab's fate. After another British victory, the empire was formally annexed to British India. The terms of the Treaty of Lahore, signed in 1849, were not just political but deeply symbolic. Among its clauses was one that specifically demanded the surrender of the Kohinoor to the British. Clause 3 of the treaty read, "The gem called the Kohinoor, which came into possession of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, shall be surrendered by the Maharaja of Lahore to the Queen of England." Thus, the Mountain of Light, once the pride of Indian and Persian emperors, was handed over to a foreign power. The young Dalip Singh, now a ward of the British crown, was forced to personally deliver the diamond to representatives of the East India Company. The act was ceremonial, yet humiliating, the final act of subjugation to the British. It was not just a transfer of property, but a symbolic confirmation that the British Empire now ruled over the East, inheriting its legacy and its treasures. In July 1850, the Kohinoor was shipped to England aboard the HMS Medea, making its first voyage across the seas. The journey was long and perilous. Storms battered the ship, and an outbreak of cholera struck the crew, events that many later claimed were further proof of the diamond's curse. But despite these omens, the gem reached London safely, destined for the hands of Queen Victoria. Its new chapter would begin not in the palace of Lahore or a fort of Delhi, but in the royal courts of the world's most powerful empire. The transfer of the Kohinoor marked more than the movement of a jewel. It symbolized a shift of global power. The diamond that had once embodied India's divine right to rule now represented Britain's imperial dominance. To the British, it was a trophy of victory, proof of their superiority and civilization's triumph over the Orient. To Indians, however, it was a wound, the theft of their heritage, pride, and history. As the Kohinoor glittered in the light of Buckingham Palace, its brilliance carried with it the weight of centuries of conquest, blood, and betrayal. When the Kohinoor diamond finally reached Britain in 1850, it carried with it the weight of centuries of legend, blood, and empire. To the British Empire, at the height of its global dominance, this was not merely a stone. It was the most potent trophy of conquest ever won. It represented the subjugation of India, the jewel in the crown of Britain's colonial possessions, and the transfer of divine right from the east to the west. The diamond that had once adorned Mughal emperors, Persian shahs, Afghan kings, and Sikh maharajas now belonged to Queen Victoria, the ruler of the most powerful empire in the world. Yet behind the triumphal rhetoric of imperial glory lay an undercurrent of unease, curiosity, and even superstition. For the British, too, soon discovered that the Kohinoor's light came with shadow. The diamond's arrival in England was met with enormous public fascination. Newspapers across Europe and India reported every detail of its journey aboard the HMS Medea. When the ship docked at Portsmouth in July 1850, the Kohinoor was immediately taken under heavy guard to the East India House in London, the headquarters of the British East India Company, where it was formally presented to Queen Victoria on July 3, 1850. The The presentation ceremony was meant to symbolize the unity of empire, the might of British arms, and the loyalty of their Indian subjects. The Governor-General of India, Lord Dalhousie, proudly wrote that the diamond was a fitting gift from India to her sovereign. But many Indians saw it not as a gift, but as an act of coercion and humiliation, a reminder how their land and culture had been plundered under the banner of civilization. Queen Victoria, however, accepted the Kohinoor with delight and curiosity. She had heard tales of its brilliance and power, the diamond that had outshone all others, the jewel for which empires had fallen. But when she finally laid eyes on it, she was underwhelmed. The Kohinoor at that time was an oval-shaped, flat-cut stone weighing about 186 carats, with a dull, grayish tint that did not sparkle in the way modern diamonds do. To Victorian sensibilities, accustomed to the precision and brilliance of European diamond cutting, it appeared disappointing. Still, it held immense symbolic value. Queen Victoria ordered that it be displayed to the public as a testament to Britain's imperial might. In 1851, the Kohinoor was exhibited at the Great Exhibition in London, housed within the magnificent Crystal Palace, a vast glass structure built in Hyde Park to celebrate Britain's industrial and imperial achievements. The diamond was placed in the India section, under the care of the East India Company, as the centerpiece of the empire's wealth. Thousands of visitors queued to see the fabled gem, expecting it to radiate celestial light. But the display was poorly lit, and the uncut diamond surface did not reflect light as brilliantly as expected. Many left unimpressed. One journalist from the Times called it a large but disappointing lump of glass. For a jewel that had inspired centuries of awe, the reception was almost insulting. To restore its glory, Queen Victoria's husband, Prince Albert, decided that the diamond should be recut using the latest European techniques. The task was entrusted to a team of expert jewelers from Koster Diamonds in Amsterdam. The process began in July 1852, with Queen Victoria herself attending the first cutting session. A specially designed steam-powered wheel was used for the operation, an innovation of the industrial age symbolizing progress and technology. Over 38 days of painstaking work, nearly 80 carats were cut away, reducing the gem from 186 to 105.6 carats. The result was a more brilliant, oval-shaped, faceted stone that finally met Western standards of beauty. Yet, in doing so, much of its original substance, and perhaps its soul, was lost. After the recut, the Kohinoor was set into a brooch for Queen Victoria, who wore it occasionally at state functions. Later, it was incorporated into a royal circlet and eventually placed in the crown of Queen Alexandra, 1902, and later Queen Mary, 1911. Today, it resides in the crown of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, displayed among the British crown jewels in the Tower of London. Each transition marked a symbolic act. The diamond, once a sacred emblem of Indian kingship, had been transformed into an ornament of imperial majesty, signifying British global power and divine right. But even as it sparkled under the lights of British palaces, whispers of the Kohinoor's curse followed it across the ocean. Indian folklore warned that the diamond brought misfortune to any man who possessed it, but bestowed luck upon women. Curiously, since arriving in Britain, it had only been worn by female members of the royal family. Queen Victoria, Queen Alexandra, Queen Mary, and Queen Elizabeth, perhaps a deliberate act of superstition disguised as tradition. Still, tragedy was never far behind. Prince Albert died young. Queen Victoria's empire was shaken by the Indian Rebellion of 1857, and global wars would later test the very foundations of British dominance. Many began to wonder whether the Kohinoor's ancient curse had crossed the seas with it. The diamond's presence in Britain also sparked an early awareness of imperial ethics and cultural appropriation. Even in the 19th century, a few voices questioned whether it truly belonged to Britain. The Indian press described its transfer as legal robbery, and some British intellectuals, influenced by the rising tide of liberal thought, argued that taking sacred artifacts from colonized nations tarnished Britain's moral authority. Still, for the empire's leadership, such concerns were dismissed as sentimental. The Kohinoor was seen as proof that Britain had succeeded where all others had failed. It had conquered the diamond itself, and by extension, the East. To Queen Victoria personally, the Kohinoor symbolized something more intimate. She saw it as a bridge between herself and her Indian subjects, a token of her sovereignty over a vast and diverse empire. She often had portraits painted wearing it, reinforcing her image as Empress of India. Yet, the irony remained. The jewel's glow, so dazzling in royal portraits, was the light of plunder. Beneath its sparkle lay the darkness of conquest, loss, and exploitation, truths that empire tried hard to forget. By the time Victoria's long reign ended in 1901, the Kohinoor had become inseparable from the identity of the British monarchy. It no longer merely reflected the wealth of a single empire. It represented the transformation of global power. The same stone that had once rested in Mughal palaces and Afghan tents now glittered atop crowns that symbolized dominion over a quarter of the world. And yet, as history would later reveal, the diamond story was far from over. Its glow continued to illuminate unresolved questions of ownership, justice, and morality, questions that would burn brighter in the post-colonial age. Today, the Kohinoor diamond lies behind glass in the Tower of London, gleaming within the British crown jewels. Yet its brilliance carries centuries of pain. To India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Iran, it remains a lost treasure. To Britain, a royal heirloom. Since India's independence in 1947, repeated demands for its return have stirred global debate over justice and colonial legacy. Britain insists it was obtained legally, but many argue it was taken by force under the Treaty of Lahore, 1849, a symbol of imperial theft disguised as diplomacy. Over time, the diamond has come to represent more than wealth. It embodies the complex history of empire, conquest, and cultural pride. Even now, superstition lingers. Only queens have worn it, for legend says it brings ruin to men. During King Charles III's coronation, the crown without the Kohinoor spoke volumes. A quiet admission that history's wounds still shine through its facets. The Mountain of Light remains a paradox, beauty born from suffering, power shadowed by loss. Whether it ever returns home or stays locked in royal glory, the Kohinoor will forever symbolize the rise and fall of empires and humanity's endless pursuit of power and pride.